So I will iterate, this is not the only reason why I'm not a Muslim. However, this question is really begged when you look at how they speak about Jesus, because their view of Jesus was, well, he's a prophet and he wasn't crucified. Most say that. Some say he was crucified, but that's a very small minority. The question really is, why should we trust a document that was written hundreds of years after Jesus' life over documents written mere decades, and even a creed written within 5 years of his crucifixion, or the events said to have taken place? That's the question a Muslim has to answer. And they can't say something like, well, the Quran is the word of God, because then that's a circular argument. You're saying, well, the Quran is right about this because the Quran is right. Or you could say the Quran is the word of God, and it says that, Jesus did this and it's right because the Quran is the word of God. It's a circular argument. So they really just have to come up with some logical reason. Because they say, well, it got corrupted. Although I don't think there's any basis in the Hadith or the Quran for saying that. If anything, the Quran or Hadith sanctions the Gospels, which creates an even bigger issue. But even if we get by that, if you want to pick one over the other, which is what you need to do here, because they contradict each other, why would you pick the Quran? Why would you pick the Hadith? They were written so long after Jesus. And if you try going around like, well, the original Gospels were corrupted, it's like, well, okay. Where are the originals? Where are the uncorrupted versions? Do they exist anywhere? What about, and even corruption? I mean, even if you go by gospel as opposed to creed, Mark was written in what, like 50, 60 AD, 20 to 30 years after Jesus' crucifixion, or the events said to have happened in the Gospels? 20 to 30 years. Historically speaking, especially given the time period, that's a very short time. For this mass corruption to happen is highly unlikely, especially because the disciples are sanctioned in the Quran or Hadith. Forgot which one. But either one. In Islam, the disciples are seen as just. Now, the next point I want to make is about the creed. Because even if 20 to 30 years is already it's already highly unlikely that it would be corrupted, but he goes to the creed in 1 Corinthians 15. 1 to 5 years after Jesus' crucifixion. 1 to 5 years. You're telling me the whole entire message got corrupted within that time period without any evidence of the original message. There's no evidence at all. The only evidence for this supposed mass corruption is the Quran, supposedly, although it doesn't say it, but that's what they try to say, which was written hundreds of years after the event. So the real question for the Muslim has to answer is that, and they can't say the Quran is the word of God, because that's circular. They have to answer the question of, well, how, or rather, why should we trust this document written 100 years after the fact, when we have a creed from 1 to 5 years afterwards, and Gospels from 20 to 50 years after the event? Why do we go to this source that is hundreds of years after?